Have you ever noticed how some people seem to stay consistent almost effortlessly, while the rest of us keep starting strong, then somehow drift off course? And here's the strange part. It's usually not a time problem. It's not even a motivation problem. A lot of the time, it's a subconscious belief problem, because what you believe deep down quietly shapes what you do when no one's watching. It shapes whether you follow through, whether you trust yourself, whether you push through discomfort or pull back the moment things get a little hard. And if you've ever thought, why do I keep doing this to myself? This might be the missing piece. Now here's where it gets interesting. Most people think consistency comes from discipline alone, but discipline is only the surface. Underneath that, there's a story running in the background, a belief, a mental model, a hidden expectation about who you are, what you deserve, and what happens when you try. That's why two people can read the same book, watch the same video, hear the same advice, and get completely different results. One person applies it, the other person feels inspired for a day, and then goes right back to the old pattern. Why? Because the subconscious doesn't care what you say you want nearly as much as it cares what it believes is true. And this is where the phrase thoughts are things starts to make a lot more sense. Not in a magical, floating in the air kind of way, but in a practical way. Thoughts become repeated. Repeated thoughts become beliefs. Beliefs become decisions. And decisions repeated over time become your reality. Let me tell you why this matters so much. If your subconscious believes you're the kind of person who always quits, then even your best intentions will eventually bend toward that identity. If it believes success is unsafe, then progress will start to feel uncomfortable. If it believes confidence is something other people are born with, then you'll keep waiting to feel ready instead of acting. And that waiting, that's where a lot of people get stuck. Because confidence is not just a feeling. Confidence is often the result of evidence, and evidence comes from action. But if your subconscious keeps feeding you doubt, you won't take the action long enough to build the evidence. So the whole thing becomes a loop. Doubt stops action. Lack of action prevents proof. And without proof, the doubt gets stronger. Sound familiar? First, let's talk about consistency. Consistency is not really about being hyper-motivated every day. That's a myth. Real consistency comes from identity. It comes from the belief that this is just who I am. Not I'm trying to be this person. Not I'll become this person someday. But this is what I do. This is how I move. This is who I am now. And your subconscious loves identity. It grabs onto it. So, if you deeply believe I'm someone who finishes what I start, you're far more likely to keep showing up even when your feelings change. But if you believe I always get excited and then fall off, your mind will keep looking for ways to prove that true. That's the kicker. The subconscious is not just a storage room for old memories. It's a pattern-matching machine. It looks for familiar emotional territory. It wants to keep you aligned with what feels known, even if what's known is limiting. So when you try to change, part of you may actually resist it. Not because you're broken, but because your mind is trying to protect the familiar. And this is where cognitive reframing becomes powerful. Cognitive reframing is basically the art of changing the meaning you assign to what's happening. Instead of saying, I failed again, so I'm not disciplined, you reframe it as, I found a pattern I can now work with. Instead of, I'm bad at follow-through, it becomes, I'm learning how to stay with discomfort longer. That shift sounds small, but it changes everything. Because the subconscious listens to meaning. If you interpret every setback as proof that you're incapable, your mind will build a model of helplessness. But if you interpret setbacks as feedback, your mind starts building resilience. Same event, different meaning, different outcome. And confidence? Confidence is built the same way. A lot of people think confident people just don't feel fear. That's not true at all. Confident people are usually just more willing to move with fear because they trust themselves to handle what comes next. And where does that trust come from? Repeated proof, repeated reframing, repeated inner messages that say, I can do hard things. I can figure things out. I don't need to be perfect to make progress. In my experience, one of the fastest ways to grow confidence is to stop asking, do I feel ready? And start asking, what would a person who trusts themselves do right now? That question is huge because it moves you out of emotional reaction and into identity-based action. Now let's get into follow-through, because this is where so many good intentions go to die. Follow-through usually breaks down when the subconscious doesn't believe the goal is safe, realistic, or truly yours. Maybe you set a goal because it sounds impressive, but inside, a part of you thinks you'll be judged if you succeed, Or maybe you want a new habit, but another part of you associates change with pressure, failure, or shame. So every time you try to follow through, that inner conflict creates friction. That friction can look like procrastination, forgetting, self-sabotage, starting over, getting busy with everything except the one thing that matters. And people often call that laziness. But honestly, a lot of the time, it's unresolved belief conflict. So what do? You don't bully yourself into changing. You reprogram the meaning. You start by noticing the sentence behind the behavior. What does the subconscious story sound like? I always mess this up. People like me don't succeed. If I'm not amazing at it right away, I should stop. Once you hear the story, you can challenge it, not by pretending everything is perfect, but by replacing the old script with a more useful one. Something like, I don't need to do this perfectly. I just need to keep going. Or consistency is built through return, not perfection. Or every small action is evidence that I'm becoming the person I want to be. And that right there is how you turn thoughts into things, because your mind begins to organize your actions around the new belief. You stop seeing effort as a threat. You stop seeing setbacks as identity failures. You stop treating one bad day like a permanent character flaw. And slowly, the internal story changes. Then, the external behavior follows. But wait, there's something even deeper here. The subconscious doesn't just influence what you do. It influences what you allow, what you tolerate, what you expect. If deep down you believe success is for other people, you may unconsciously settle for less. If you believe being visible is dangerous, you might hide your talents. If you believe consistency is only for super disciplined people, you'll keep separating yourself from the very traits you want to build. That's why self-image matters so much. Your self-image is like the operating system underneath everything. And when you upgrade the operating system, the whole machine starts behaving differently. So here's the real work. Not just repeating positive phrases, but truly embodying a new mental model. A mental model is the lens you use to interpret reality. If your model says, progress should feel easy or it doesn't count, you'll quit at the first sign of resistance. But if your model says, resistance is part of growth, you'll keep going. If your model says, my current habits define me, you'll feel trapped by your past. But if your model says, my habits are trainable, you'll feel empowered. That shift is everything. And I want to be careful here because this isn't about denying reality. It's not about ignoring real obstacles. It's about changing the internal framework so you respond differently to those obstacles. That's what cognitive reframing does. It doesn't erase the challenge. It changes your relationship to it. So let me give you something practical. The next time you catch yourself saying, I'm just not consistent, pause. Don't just repeat that. Ask yourself, who taught me that? Is that actually true, or is that just an old pattern speaking? The next time you feel resistance, ask, what belief is this bringing up? And when you notice yourself hesitating, don't rush to shame. Get curious, because curiosity is powerful. Shame keeps you stuck. Curiosity gives you data. And here's the beautiful part. Your subconscious can be changed. It's not fixed. It's not your final verdict. It learns through repetition, emotion, imagery, and experience. So if you keep pairing your new identity with small wins, your mind begins to accept it as normal. At first, it feels unnatural. Then it feels possible. Then it feels familiar. And eventually, it becomes who you are. That's how people transform. Not by one dramatic breakthrough. Not by waiting to become motivated, but by deciding over and over that their thoughts are not just passing noise. They are instructions. They are signals. They are the blueprint. So if you want a different life, start by speaking to the part of you that's been listening all along. Tell it a new story. Prove it with small actions. Reframe the setback. Rebuild the identity. And keep going. Because once your subconscious starts believing that change is safe, that consistency is normal, and that follow-through is part of who you are, everything begins to shift. And honestly, that's when life starts to feel less like a struggle against yourself, and more like a collaboration with who you're becoming. If this connected with you, take one belief you've outgrown and rewrite it today. Start there, not someday, today. And remember, the life you keep thinking about is usually being built by the thoughts you keep repeating.